All right, today we're talking about the story of God and how it gets written in our lives today. The song that the kids sang just gives that message right out clear that God is doing something that He wants to do in our hearts so that we can take it to the world around us, near and far. And the globe reminds us that it's not just our little lives and God's building, working in our lives just to make us special, but to make God special so we can bless Him in return through each of our lives. Each of us have a story, and it's fun to sit down and hear people's stories. And I hope that you're a person that tells stories to others around you, the stories of your life, because these stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, remind us of our humanity, but they remind us also of God's divinity and who He is and what He does in our lives. Benjamin Franklin said that you should either have two things in your life. You either should write things that people will want to read, or you should do things that people would write about. If we want to be able to make a mark, that's a good way to be able to think about our lives. But when it comes down to us, most of us are not going to have autobiographies or biographies written about us. The best we're going to do is have an obituary at the end of our life. And I love the way now that obituaries tell more than just the facts. It tells some things about the people and their characters and their personalities and the things they enjoy doing. And that personal touch is really nice. But the stories live on in our children and grandchildren. But after a few generations, we're just a tombstone, a name and a number that doesn't mean much here on earth. But our story does mean something because it does leave a mark on the earth in ways that only God can make come about. And so we pray that our lives, maybe you think they're not that exciting, maybe they're just ordinary, but yet our lives do have purpose even in the day-to-day. There are different ways that God takes His pen and writes into our lives when He shows His will as we go through our life here. One is through this first one, God's Word or prayer? Prayer, okay. Through prayer. As we pray, God is like taking His pen and writing down the answers so we can be able to seek Him and know where He's leading us in our lives. And so prayer is one of those things that God uses to write in our lives. The other thing is just God's Word itself. When the verses and the truth of God's Word jumps off the page and directs us and is that light that shines on our path and shows us what way to go in our life, how to live and what decisions to make and how to keep moving on in our life. Those are the things that God does through His Word to be able to teach us and to show us and to write as well. God uses circumstances in our life. Last week when we were talking about different questions we had, the question came up about coincidences. Are coincidences something that we need to pay attention to or not? And a lot of times coincidences are basically just circumstances that come about in different ways to be able to show us what's happening in our life, to be able to direct us. We don't have a lot of control over all of our circumstances. Some of them we do. But those circumstances are things that God brings into our lives to be able to keep us on the path that He wants us to. And as well, He uses other people. When other people speak into our lives, when they're examples to us, when they are befriending us, those relationships can reflect what God is doing and writing into our life. A lot of people can say, well, who I am is really a reflection of the people around me because they have made me who I am, starting from your family that you were born into, to the family you create, to the friends, the community that we're in. Those things shape us and make us who we are. And so these four things become basically God's pen as He's writing our life. And when we look at our life story and think back, if we think about walking with God throughout our life, these four elements come together to be able to show us just how God has been working. And today, I just wanted to use a few illustrations from my own life about some different ways that God has used these four things specifically to guide me, and just to share some of my story with you. And some of these stories, a few of you have heard or here or there, or parts of it, I really haven't shared probably a lot of stories, illustrations from my life from the pulpit. I sometimes think about telling a certain story, but then I think, it maybe sounds corny or it's just, I'd rather tell about something else going on here. But today we're going to focus on me, not because I'm so great or these stories are so great, but they're just some stories in my life that God has used to be able to write his story in my life. And I hope that we can become a congregation that shares our stories with each other. I love hearing your stories. And if I'm talking to you, I'll ask you a lot of questions about your life because I love hearing your stories and how God has made you who you are in the past and who you are today. And it's just a great thing to be able to share those things with one another. In Psalm 107, 1-3, the psalm says, "Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, those who he redeemed from the hand of the foe, those he gathered from the lands, from east and west, north and south." Let those who have been redeemed of the Lord tell their story. Let's not keep it silent. Let's tell our story about what God has done in our life. And in Psalm 66:16, another verse says, "Come and hear, all you who fear God. Let me tell you what he has done for me." Thinking about God's word, the place that's played in my life in lots of different ways. But one of the ways was when I was a young man, just had finished college and was on my own. And when I was a child, I had a conversion experience. My parents, my church helped guide me in the ways that were true. And as a child, I said, yes, I want to follow God. And I had that childhood conversion experience. But a lot of it was probably based on typical childhood fears that I want to do the right thing. I want to make God happy, because if I don't make God happy, then I know what the alternative is. And so, there's a little bit of that in all of us. But I think I held on to that for a long, long time. And only as a young adult, I began to see that, following God isn't a matter of who I am on the outside, but who I am in my heart. And there was a verse in 1 John chapter 1, verse 7 that I came across, and it jumped off the page to me. And it says, "If we walk in the light as he is in the light, then we have fellowship with one another, because the blood of Jesus Christ cleanses us from all sin." If we walk in the light, and I kind of felt like at that age, 22, 23, I'm like, okay, what's it mean to walk in the light and have that fellowship with God? What's that mean? And having the blood of Jesus Christ cleanse me from my sin, that's the basis of everything. And even though I heard that my whole life and I believed it and I told people about it, there was a point at that point when I remember taking a walk one evening. It was dark outside and there was a moon up and the stars, and I was looking up thinking about that verse. What does it mean to walk in the light? And I was asking God, what does that mean? And he started as I was looking up there at that sky, I felt like I understood it, like more than I ever had in my life before, that it wasn't just what it looked like on the outside, but it was what it looked like on the heart. And at that time, I just prayed and said, God, I want my heart to be yours. I want your light to shine on my heart so that your light not only shine in me, but through me. Because I felt like my heart wasn't really shining God the way that it needed to be. I felt like my heart was still full of a lot of the darkness that was in my own sin nature there. And I said, God, come alongside and just cleanse me with your blood. And, at what point you actually become a Christian, whether it was when I was 8 years old or at that moment, maybe there was just two parts of it. I understood it to a certain extent then, and I understood the rest of it then. But from that point on, man, something changed inside of me. And that verse from God, that truth, penetrated my heart. And ever since then, man, that verse, that's probably my favorite verse in the Bible, because I just feel like that's what, it's almost like God wrote it just for me. That's God's truth for me. And I can walk in the light as he is in the light. And I can have that fellowship with him. And because the blood of Jesus Christ has cleansed me from my sin, I have a relationship with the Lord. And because of that, I can live for him. I can let his light shine through me. And sometimes it shines lighter or dimmer than others. I mean, that we go through phases of our life. But that's a commitment that God's word has had in my life to be able to have an impact for him. When I think about prayer and the role that it played, at that same about time period that previous story took place, I was also kind of in having my midlife crisis at 23 years old, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Because I finished college, I had a degree, but I didn't want to work in that area, and I didn't know what I wanted to do or what I wanted to be. And I took all these like career counseling tests that you take, you know, and you fill out all these forms and answer all these questions supposed to tell you what's the best job for you. Well, it didn't work. The counselor that I had to put through that said, this test didn't work for you, okay? It was just not obvious what I should be. Because I had a little bit of an interest in that way and a bent this way, and I was kind of like, I didn't fit any mold. And so I actually felt kind of bad about myself. I thought I'm just this loser that doesn't fit anywhere, and I have no clue at 23 years old what I'm going to do with my life. And so I was pretty upset about it. But I heard a Christian speaker talking about, and this is back in 1990, he had just come over from Eastern Europe and Russia. And at that time, things were changing. History was being made by the day over there. And he came back and he was reporting about all these things that God was doing in that part of the world. And I left that meeting going, okay, and I grew up in the Cold War and I was scared of bombs and all that sort of thing. So I thought, God, if you could change governments and whole countries and parts of the world and these strongholds and this iron curtain that fell and all this sort of thing, you could show me where I fit in this world of yours. You know, that was my take from that, hearing that guy speak. And so I went home and said, I am going to start just praying. God, you can show me where I fit. Where is my place in this world? And I asked my mom, I said, Mom, would you be praying, help me to help figure this out? Maybe God will show you something. Let's just really pray and ask God. This is at the beginning of the summer. And throughout the course of the summer, what was interesting was, even though that night I heard about Russia and Eastern Europe, it still didn't matter to me what part of the world this guy was talking about. I was just amazed God could do these things and change history. So God could change my life as well. And so, but over the course of the summer, as I began to pray, all of a sudden, my heart began to feel stirred about, wow, there's people in these parts of the world that have lived under generations of communism, atheism. They haven't had parents and grandparents and people like I have had to be able to pass on the faith to them. Many people haven't had churches to go to or Bibles that they've been able to own or all the opportunities that we have here. And all of a sudden I began to develop this burden for people in that part of the world, thinking, wow, we need to send people over there. We need to help these people to build churches and to know the Lord. And as I began to pray about that, I felt like God was saying, well, you're one of them. You're one of them that's going to go. And I began to get excited about that idea, the idea of going to a part of the world where I could be a part of something new that God was doing in that part of the world. And so I was talking with my mom later on, and I just said to her, because I hadn't told her any of this that I was coming to, and I said, Mom, I think I know how God's answering our prayer. And I said, I feel like God's saying I need to be a missionary. And she said that she felt like that was something that God impressed upon her as well in her prayers. And she said, and like, for example, over in Russia, things are open now, and there's things people can do over there. And I said, well, Mom, that's actually where I feel like God wants me to go. And, and if ever she complained about me being gone so long, she's the one that said it first. So it's not really her fault that I ended up in Russia, but God really confirmed, that He was, through our prayers, He was leading in a way that gave answers to some of the questions I had in my life. And so it gave me comfort. It gave me understanding that this is, and it was scary, and it wasn't easy to think about packing up and going to another country where you didn't know anything that was going to happen and what life would be like, but it was exciting, and I was excited to be able to walk that way that God was leading me on. And so through prayer, as we pray about different things, God can answer those prayers. Sometimes it takes a certain amount of time. Sometimes it gets confirmed through other people. But as we pray, God will put burdens on our hearts. He'll raise ideas in our head that we think, where did that come from? What did I eat for breakfast today? Where did that idea come from? I must not be getting enough sleep or something. But God will confirm that it's from Him as we think about our prayers. Circumstances are another thing that God uses to help show us the story that He's writing on our life. And as I was at the time turning 34 years old and not married, and of course really wanting to settle down I had always said I'm not going to marry a Russian. That wasn't something that was on my agenda at all, and I lived several years in Russia with that stance. But there came a time that all of a sudden I was like, okay, there's this girl over here that's catching my attention, and it doesn't matter that she's Russian or whatever it is. She's got my attention. And so I began to think, okay, who is this girl over here? And Alina was going to our church, and so we knew each other a little bit. But what was interesting after she got my attention was that all these circumstances started happening that kind of were bringing our lives together a little bit. For one, we live in the city of like 12 million people, okay, and we lived in the same side of town with each other, but it was very rare that when you were out on public transport, all the buses and subways and everything out. I mean, I can count my whole, up until that time, 10 years or 8 years in Russia at that time, and I'd probably run into somebody I knew a couple times ever. You just never run into people. Hardly ever. But all of a sudden we started running into each other several times over the course of a very short period of time. We would, be out somewhere walking or in the subway station at the same time, and there were just as we went back and compared notes, there were just really weird things that happened that all of a sudden our plans changed, and all of a sudden we ended up in this place at the same time, and we'd see each other. And so being able to see each other pretty often, it was kind of like God was kind of like reminding, hey, I'm doing something here. I'm orchestrating something, bringing you guys together. Even though it may seem, you're from two different worlds, and there's, her being a Russian wasn't on your radar, but now it is, and it really is on your radar because I'm kind of controlling you here. And at the time, I was looking for a new apartment to move into, and the side of town I was looking on was the same side of town that she lived in, but we're talking about an area that's probably about 20 miles long and about 5 miles wide that you can find an apartment in. And there weren't like a zillion apartments available that would work and everything, but the agent I had was looking for an apartment and found an apartment that was just down the street from her. So I ended up moving into this apartment that was literally on the same street that she lived on, just the subway station was here, then my apartment was here, and her apartment was a little bit further down. And so I ended up moving in the neighborhood by chance, but it was God. It was God using circumstances to bring our lives a little bit more together so it would make a little more sense. And because she was helping in the youth group at the time and we were at the same church, naturally when we would be coming home from things together, we'd be coming the same direction. And so it seemed natural that I would just walk her home after that. And that's a whole nother story we could tell you about later. But walking her home, living in the same area in a huge city. I mean, imagine Chicago or something like that. I mean, God used circumstances to help bring us together. And it's a really beautiful and it's a fun way to be able to say, hey, God's writing a story. And I'm sure in so many different situations in our lives, not just finding our love of our life, but in so many situations in our life, God uses circumstances to get us to move this way or to go that way or to look here or to meet that person there. And there's significant people that have come into our lives and we're like, wow, God orchestrated that. And one of the things I say a lot is that it seems like I get to meet the best people in the whole world anywhere I go. I just feel like God's given me the opportunity to meet the cream of the crop. No matter where I've been in the world, I feel like I get to meet them. And I feel like God's given me that honor. And maybe there's a lot more cream of the crop people I haven't met out there, but I just feel like everywhere I go, I do. And I'm really thankful for that. And even thankful for this congregation, because I feel like I've met some of the cream of the crop as well. And so it's great to see circumstances come together as God writes our stories. And when we look at circumstances, some of the circumstances are negative. Some of them are, at the time, I was upset that I had to move out of my other apartment and find another place to live, and it was a bad timing, and it was all this work, and it was going to cost more and everything else. So what started out as a problem ended up being a blessing. And sometimes the problems in our life, God's just using that to bring change and to work in our hearts and to get us to the place where we need to be for that next season of our life. The last story I'm going to tell is that, I thought I was going to live in Russia forever. I moved there. I loved it. It was a great ministry to be involved with, and I had a vision that I could be here doing what I'm doing until the day I die, and I can make more than a dent. I want to be where God wants me to be, and this is a great place to be. we got married when I had lived there for 9 years. So my first 9 years in Russia was single, and then we got married and started our family right away. But there came a point where we started to feel like, both Alina and I, that something's going to change in our lives. We weren't sure what it was. Maybe a different kind of ministry, or maybe I was going to not work at a church, but work in the business world there, and I was kind of looking into that. And we even thought about moving to a different country where there were a lot of Russians. We were kind of looking into that, thinking maybe this is an opportunity. But we felt like something was going to change in our lives, but we didn't really know what. But one of the things we knew it would never be was to move back to America. I mean, I never wanted to move back here, not because I hate America or I'm not, I don't have red, white, and blue on me. And actually, red, white, and blue is the colors of Russia too, so it's kind of the same. But I just felt like, this is where God's got me, and I had a long-term vision, and I was focused on that. Alina herself, even though she knew English, she knew lots of Americans, had been around American culture a lot. She'd been to America to visit. She didn't want to come live here either. She had a heart for her country. She wanted to be there. And one of the things we talked about when we were dating was, we're not moving out of here. This is where we're going to be, and we kind of agreed on that. And because I was kind of afraid, okay, I'm going to marry some Russian girl I'm going to get married, and then the next day she's going to say, let's go to America, and I didn't want that to happen. And of course, she didn't want her American husband to say, I'm tired of living here, let's go back to America. And so we kind of had this agreement that we weren't going to move back. And even with Alina's parents, when we were talking about getting married, I told them, I'm not going to take your daughter away, and we're going to be right here. This is our plan. And of course, grandkids came along, but we knew something was going to change in our life. But coming to America was not it. But we were praying and just going, God, what is it? We're not sure what is going to change in our lives, but something was going to change. Well, as I was praying and stuff, and I was just kind of feeling like God was saying, I think your job in Russia's done. I think these other opportunities that you've been looking into, these are not those that I've got for you, but I think it's time to go back to America. And I felt like God was telling me that, and I was thinking, but God, that can't be right, because my wife and I made an agreement, and if I tell her that we're going to move to America, she's going to be really upset, and this, I broke my promise, and I just really felt like this is, I don't know, this doesn't make sense, but yet I still felt like God was saying, this is what you need to do. And so there came a day when I thought, man, I need to kind of break this news to her, and I'm not sure quite how to do it. But I did. I told her I felt like this is what God's doing. My job here is done, and we're supposed to go back to America. And and she answered back. She said as she was praying, she felt like that's what God was telling her too, but she was afraid to say that to me because she knew I would be upset if I heard my wife say, well, I think we need to go to America, because that was my worst fear. But when we got out in the open, it was like, wow, God's using other people in our lives to confirm something that God is leading us on. And it was just like such a sigh of relief. And we're still had these doubts, could this really be? And, it just seemed really strange because we were both heading in one direction. And all of a sudden it was like God's starting to lead us on a different direction. And that was really hard. And it took us several months to really grasp what that meant and what God was doing in that. And but God kept confirming to our hearts that was his next step in our lives. And even though it meant cutting a lot of ties and changing a lot of things in our life and starting everything new again, and a lot of transition and change and tough days and stuff, we knew that that's the way God was leading. And God can confirm things to us through other people. And that's what God did in our situation. God confirmed what God was telling us through each other and our friends and family. And I always say this to people: if you're trying to make a decision about something and you're looking for God's will, then ask the people around you who love God and love you to pray with you about that matter, about that decision. Ask them to pray with you about it, because if they love you and they love God, then God can really use them as instruments to help show you what God is doing and what God's telling you. And God may show that person something you've never thought of before, and God can speak through that other person and to make God's reality alive in us. And I just pray that as we tell our stories to one another, even the stories that aren't completed yet, I mean, we live in the now. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, and we have all these situations in our lives that are just like, we don't know what the next step is, and it's coming. but to be current with one another in those things and to support each other, encourage each other as God writes those stories. God's doing beautiful things in each of our lives. And the stories I told are kind of the big transition stories, but God works the same way in the mundane, day-to-day things in our lives. Deciding about our schedule for the day and how we're raising our kids and our grandkids and how we're dealing with different problems and things that come our way. Prayer, God's word, circumstances, and other people come together. Those four ingredients come together to show us what God's will is for that day. Even if it's just stopping by this store or doing that or stopping this or starting that or talking to this person or calling them or writing them a letter or doing what we need to do. God leads us in the little things as well as the big changes in our life. And we can trust him as he does that. And I just pray that as God's writing our stories, that we can see the past, we can see the future as he's writing with his pen using these four